A ceasefire has come into effect after a deal was brokered between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza. The militants and Israel agreed to that truce after talks were mediated by Egypt. Officials in Gaza claim at least 31 Palestinians have been killed in the airstrikes, some suggesting there's more than 40, with a third of those civilians. The attacks are the largest increase in tension since an 11-day conflict in May last year claimed the lives of more than 200 Palestinians and a dozen Israelis. And joining us live now from Sydney is former Ambassador to Israel and former MP Dave Sharma. Dave, good to see you. So let's start off with Israel. We've got a few issues to talk about here. It's been the biggest flare-up since May last year. We spoke about that quite often last year. That ceasefire is now in effect, but how likely is it that it'll hold?
Look, it's probably about 50%, I'd say, Peter. I mean, this has been sparked because Israel arrested, quite rightly, a senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader figure in the West Bank, PRG, which is a sort of an offshoot militant group that's strong in Gaza, decided to conduct reprisals to, show that they wouldn't be cowed by this. Israel responded in return. And this is the normal way that these conflicts start between Israel and PRJ and Hamas in Gaza.
Wow.
It's good that the Egyptians have stepped in so early, though, to effect a ceasefire.
So do you think this is just the start? This is the start of more to come? We're going down the road of actual conflict?
Look, potentially. I mean, the sad truth is that there is some sort of conflict of significance between Israel and Hamas in Gaza every 2 to 3 years on average. The last major one, as you pointed out, was in 2021, in May 2021. So we're less than, only just a year over that. But this tends to be the pattern. The fact that Egypt has involved itself so early, though, is a welcome sign. Often the Egyptians don't want to get involved or find it difficult to get involved at this stage in a conflict. But the fact they've stepped in so quickly, I think, is a positive sign for the ceasefire holding.
Does anything ever break this cycle of violence, do you think, Dave?
Look, I'd hope so. This has been the state, though, if you like, since 2006, since Hamas ejected Fatah from rulership positions in Gaza and took over Gaza in effectively an internal coup. Now, since that time, all Hamas has shown itself interested in doing is stockpiling material to make weapons and rockets and dig tunnels to direct against Israel. They haven't shown any interest in the welfare of their population. And as a result, very few people can leave Gaza on any given day, and the number of goods that can come in and go is limited. The only thing that will change that, the only thing that will cause Egypt and Israel to lift what is a cordon, if you like, around Gaza, is a change in either the ruling party in Gaza or a change in Hamas's ideology, so that they no longer put as their top order of business the destruction of Israel, but they put as their top order of business the welfare of their citizens. That would be a welcome change, and I think that would mean that there would be a more normal relationship like there is between Israel and the West Bank, say.
Turning to China, Xi Jinping's flexing his muscles over Taiwan, most of it for an international audience, some of it for a domestic audience as well. What are your observations about what's at play and what's at stake here, Dave?
Well, the stakes are very high, and obviously the level of China's military activity that we've seen across the Taiwan Strait is the highest it's been since 1996, really, since another major incident that happened, or major point of tension that was underway then. As you pointed out, he has to signal to a domestic audience that he is responding to Nancy Pelosi's visit, but he also is trying to signal to an international audience, and an audience in Taiwan, for that matter, about China's resolve here. I think the jury is still a little out here. The question I ask myself is Taiwan's position going to be strengthened as a result of Nancy Pelosi's visit and China's military response? And at this stage, I think I'd have to say it's not clear yet whether Taiwan will come out of this stronger or weaker.
Okay. Speaking of domestic matters, the government got its legislation through the lower house last week on emissions targets. How did you feel about that?
Well, look, I think they had a mandate for it. They took pretty clearly to the election a 43% target by 2030. I was someone who, within the Liberal Party, had argued for a more ambitious interim target, and certainly argued for net zero by 2050. Look, I think it's important to give the business community certainty. That's what they've been calling out for. I think Labor's got their target through now. I think as the opposition, we should be having the debate about how do we reach that target in the most efficient, the most technology intensive, the least impactful way. That should be the debate now, rather than moving the target, a couple of percentage points one way or the other. I think that debate should be over now, and we should be focused on the how, not the destination point.
Well, okay. So now that the coalition's trying to work out what the target should be for the next election, they haven't settled on a number yet. They've still got a ways to go, plenty of time too. What sort of idea what sort of suggestion would you make on that number?
Well, look, I think Labor's got a mandate for this one. I think we should just sign up to it at the next election. I don't think we should be debating about 1 or 2 percentage points one way or the other. I think we should be talking about things which we flagged, which are, how do we reach this target? How do we replace the baseload power provided by, coal-fired power stations which are expiring or ageing out? What role can nuclear play in the future energy mix? How do we do large-scale battery storage? How do we transition the vehicle fleet? All those things are things where we will have a different policy approach to Labor. I'm convinced of it. But I don't think the public is that interested in a debate about whether we do it, 2 percentage points higher or 2 percentage points lower in 2030. We've given business certainty now with the passage of this legislation, provided it goes through the Senate. I think we should just get on with it.
Right. Chris Bowen's earmarked about 6 different areas for offshore wind farms. What do you think of that idea?
Look, I think, we passed legislation in the last Parliament, this is our government, to make sure that you could do large-scale offshore electricity generation, renewable ones. So I think absolutely, offshore wind farms are a good idea. It obviously will depend upon a case-by-case analysis and the geography of the particular area and any other impacts. But we need to be looking at all options for renewable energy generation. Although I just make the point here, the biggest challenge our system faces is not getting more renewable energy, it's how to store more renewable energy.
Yeah.
And that's where schemes like Snowy 2.0 are so important.
Yeah. Yeah, you just had yourself a nice break, Dave. What did you think of the last sitting fortnight? Did it sting a bit? Did you miss the rough and tumble?
To be honest, no, I didn't. I didn't focus on it too closely. I obviously had it in the background, but it is a bit of a luxury not having to obsess over the day-to-day news cycle and politics in the way that you have to do when you're a sitting member of Parliament.
Yeah, for now though, Dave.
I'm always interested in remaining involved in the public debate, and that's why I'll continue to come on your show.
And I'll be very happy to have you here. Dave Sharma, it is good to see you. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you again soon.